Thank you for that introduction and your warm welcome. And the penalty of you being able to be here is that you have to listen to me, because whenever we have rooms in this place, we have to have a Member of Parliament sponsor it. So hence why I get the chance to say a few words. I speak as someone that was brought up with Jewish friends and neighbours, and always had a great love of the State of Israel. But equally, I've had the opportunity of visiting Israel on 7 occasions. Once as a tourist, going around back as long ago as 1992, I think it was, where I stayed and went round Israel on buses as a tourist and saw all the great places and the historical area of Israel. But equally, I've been back to Israel as a member of Conservative Friends of Israel delegations. But I've also been back to Israel with the Palestinian Return Centre and seen Jordan and the West Bank from the Palestinian perspective. And it's quite interesting. There aren't many MPs in this place that have done both of those things. There'll be some, one or two, but it's very few. Normally, in this place, people get taken to Israel or Palestine by one group or another. But very rarely do people go. But I said I would go to see both sides of the argument. And the intriguing thing is that when you sit down, and we're talking obviously about the security of the State of Israel, when you sit down with the President of the Palestinian Authority, with the representatives of the Palestinian Authority, as I did 4 years ago, and you say to them quite openly, look, time is running out for you guys. Actually, if you don't start talking sensibly to the government of the State of Israel, your chances of having a Palestinian state start to evaporate as settlements grow, as the need for more and more accommodation for Israeli citizens grow, as the economy of Israel grows. And I think we're talking now about, correct me if I'm wrong, the 10th biggest economy in the world, with a highly developed defence force, with sophisticated capability all round, then your chances of actually getting anywhere are gone. But their view is, and it still remains, I don't know, you may correct me if I'm wrong, their view seems to be, but in the long run, we will get our way. We've been around for hundreds of years, and we can sit tight and take the suffering, because in the end, we'll deliver more children than the Israelis, we'll outnumber them, and eventually we'll overwhelm them. And you just go, what planet are you on, frankly? I mean, that's my view. And if you look at the security of Israel, as I was there 2 years ago when the war with Hamas was underway. And I witnessed Israeli citizens running to the air raid shelters. We had to do the same thing when the threats of mortars and missiles were on their way. And you're right, Dan. I mean, this is the great thing about Israel. When you see people go, okay, well, yeah, we've got to put up with it. We'll go in the air raid shelter. We'll come out again and just get on with our lives. It becomes a way of life. And of course, with the Iron Dome system, I mean, one of the debates in this place, hilariously, was, well, it's unfair that Israel's got the Iron Dome system. Surely, the Israeli citizens should suffer a bit of carnage from the bombs and missiles coming. And you just go, well, wouldn't you want to stop the bombs and missiles coming? But how many bombs and missiles do you put up with? Since Israel withdrew from Gaza unilaterally, forcing people out of their homes in Gaza and handing over the whole territory of Gaza to the Palestinians, 11,000 plus rockets and bombs have come from Gaza into Israel. Now, not that many have caused damage because of both the Iron Dome system and the inaccuracy with what they're using. But how many states would put up with that? Just imagine, I always say, just imagine if the Welsh were there and they were raining bombs and rockets on England. Do you think we would react? Too true we would react. And the reality is that Israel has shown incredible patience to put up with it for as long as they did before taking action against Hamas. And we know that Hamas, as a terrorist organisation, launched missiles and rockets from schools, from hospitals, and used, above all else, the terror tunnels from Gaza. And I saw them myself, the terror tunnels from Gaza into Israel. And one of the things that I have to say, this is where I think Israeli propaganda was wrong. Because when we were there, we said, well, now you've got control over these tunnels. Take every single communications company, every TV channel into these tunnels and show them what's been going on. Show them the IDF uniforms that were stored next door to the kibbutz. Show them the weapons that were there in the terror tunnels before you destroy the terror tunnels. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. When we were there, we saw a very different set of news channels to what was being shown over in the West. Because you saw the destruction of Palestinian homes, you saw the Israeli retaliation, you didn't see what was going on in terms of the missiles flowing over into Israel. And I think that's one of the things that we have a problem with in the West, is actually understanding what is going on in the Middle East. And I take the view that Israel is on the front line in protecting democracy, not only in the Middle East, but across the world. And one of the things you said, Dan, about population, which I think is very important in this discussion, at the end of the Second World War, after millions had died, the population of Europe was 25% of the world population. Today, it's less than 10%. So in terms of population change, we are seeing that massive change. So the key here is that the relationship between the UK and Israel is absolutely critical. I take a strong view that the relationship that we have to create across the world is the United States, the UK, Israel, India, and Australia. That is a network that surrounds the world of free democracies with powerful defence forces who are dedicated to freedom and democracy and the rule of law. We might include France on that, but I'm a bit dubious about the French. But the reality is that this is the security area that we need to create, and the strong links. I'm very pleased that the links now between Israel and India are growing ever stronger, because I think that is absolutely crystal clear. Israel has suffered terrorism for a long time. India is suffering terrorism on a daily basis from the terrorist state Pakistan, and I think we should recognise Pakistan for what it is. So the reality is that every state in the world is on this. And I say, Mr. Chairman, my day today, I just describe my day today, because this is what I think how we need to encapsulate this. This morning I was in the House, in the chamber, talking about the persecution of Christians in Iran. Later this afternoon, I popped into a function when we were talking about the terrorism that India is suffering. And just before I came here, I was at a function where we were talking about the internationally displaced persons in Azerbaijan, where the battle there has been, in fact, it's the longest running saga of 1.5 million people displaced from their homeland in Azerbaijan with Armenia. And I think, one of the problems is that across the world we have these problems of what you can only call is terrorism. And that's the reality of what we have. I think we have a number of challenges in this place that I think you can take back down with you. We have a large number of people in this place. And it was a real eye-opener for me 6.5 years ago when I was elected to see the number of people who are members of Parliament who would love to see Israel wiped off the face of the planet. And we have to, the strong message that we have. There are supporters on both sides of the House for Israel. But believe you me, there are bitter enemies of the state of Israel and on both sides of the House. So we have a massive job to do to keep up the UK-Israel relationship. I think it's a strong partnership for the security, not only of the state of Israel, but the state of the world. The contribution that Israel makes in terms of defence forces, technology, and just looking at drones and the capability that came from Israel, that is now being used by the British Army across the world. It's second to none in terms of technology and is enabling our defence forces to be safe from harm, which is very, very important in this whole process. So we have, I think, a long-term security relationship. We are in the centenary of the Balfour Declaration, which of course helped to create the State of Israel in the first place. And that gives us an opportunity, I think, over the next year, not only to celebrate the declaration and celebrate the creation of the State of Israel, but also to recognise that the challenges that Israel faces. All we have to look at is when Israel was facing almost a daily terrorist attack with bombings and other attacks in Jerusalem, suicide bombings, where to get into the mentality of people that they are going to go onto a bus, go into a market square, whatever they're going to do, with bombs strapped to them, blow themselves up, quite happily to die, as long as they could take as many Israelis with them as possible, as long as they could take as many Jews as they could. That's the reality. So what did Israel do? Israel put a barrier around Jerusalem. Now, who wouldn't? Who would put a security barrier on that basis? And on the basis, how many suicide bombings are there now? Virtually none. And if you go down to the entry point, you'll know this, Dan, the entry point there is, of course, it's now regarded as a bit inhumane. The fact that people who are working in Israel come from the West Bank, go through the security checkpoints into Jerusalem and are checked. And if they have the stupidity to have bombs or guns, the only thing they'll do is blow themselves up, not anyone else. Well, who wouldn't do that under those circumstances? It's all about protecting your citizens and your right to proper security. So that's been, I think, a key dilemma in this whole process. But of course, you'll hear the siren calls in this country and in this place. Unfair, unjust, inhumane, the Palestinians are prisoners in their own land. Well, I have to tell you, I've been and talked to Palestinians in East Jerusalem, people whose homes were under threat of demolition. And when I spoke to them, I said, well, where's your documentation to prove that you've got title to this land? We haven't got it. Well, how do you prove that actually this is your property and not someone else's? Well, our families came here in 1948 when Israel was created. We moved in. And who occupied that area then? It wasn't a state of Palestine. It was, of course, Jordan. And Jordan refused to give any of those people citizenship. They refused to give them any title to the land they were in. So then you have a position that the land, they then went to the Israeli courts. And their lawyers did a deal and sold the land to Israelis. And then they complain when the Israelis who bought the land legitimately and paid for it and paid the people that were living there the money, they complain because they're now being moved on. I have to say, how stupid can you be? But therein lies the rub of the problem right across not only the state of Israel, but across Jerusalem in particular, which is, I think, I view, is the biggest obstacle to any form of peace between Israel and a fledgling state of Palestine. Because I do think that's the biggest obstacle, and all you need to do is to go to Jerusalem in the Old City and see the great photo of the Western Wall, the site of the two temples, and top of it, the mosque. There is the dilemma of Jerusalem, straight away. Who is going to have control over this? Who is going to control that in the future? So I think there's a real problem. But I do think, in the long run, this is the critical area in which I will sit down. The relationship between the UK and Israel is a very strong one. I think, Dan, you can take back the fact that both David Cameron as a Prime Minister and now Theresa May were and are 100% supporters of the State of Israel, not only its right to exist, but value very greatly the relationship between our two great countries. And equally, we will stand up, as we do, on a regular basis for that relationship and ensuring that the peace and security of Israeli citizens is protected at all costs. And the cooperation between our security forces is key, and everything else that's going on is critical. And one other thing that you mentioned, but in following, which I just want to conclude on, is the citizens of Gaza make and Hamas make this accusation, oh, we're cut off from the world. How many people in this country know that the tunnels between Egypt and the Gaza Strip are closed? They're cut off completely. Not cut off by Israel, they're cut off by the Egyptians. Why? Because they, as far as they're concerned, they are being used to supply Hamas with weapons of destruction, and they're not prepared to put up with it any longer. So Egypt is obviously a key, not ally, but neighbour to Israel, and it quite clearly has a stake in all this. And I think that the key point that we are looking at is not only the long-term security of Israel, but also the short-term. I think that the point that you make is, if you run fast, and even if problems are getting worse, well, okay, if you're running faster than everyone else, then that's key. I mean, it's the age-old truism of two people being chased by a lion. And they say, well, you can't possibly outrun the lion. No, but I can outrun you. So it's quite clear. That is the analogy that we have to look at. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.